Guess what I just realized? I didn't really tell you where Kundalini Yoga is from or how I got to be here. And maybe that personal story will help inspire you too. Okay. So, yoga itself, thousands and thousands years old. Before recorded history, we have depictions of people doing yoga. We also have an understanding that spirituality is part of how we as human beings came to this planet. As a drop of the divine, we came here to have this human experience. And ever since that time where we evolved into the beings that we are now, we've needed that sacred connection. Kundalini Yoga has its roots from India and in a particular area called the Punjab. The area of India is also called South Asia. And a way to think about it is that all of that ancient area had practices of consciousness, whether it was martial arts or dance or yoga or the ability to interact with animals or plants. All of this ancient knowledge was harnessed by teachers who spent their lifetimes dedicated to that. And they taught from one teacher to another student, from that student becomes a teacher, and so on, teacher to student, until we get right here. Kundalini Yoga came to the West in the 1960s. And alongside of it were many, many other teachers from India, from South Asia, who came to offer the wisdom traditions, those ancient wisdom traditions to all of us, starting, I think, some of the earlier ones, 1920s. And you can see by the reference points that these times in our human history were very complex, just as they are now. There were times of severe repression, racism, political instability, economic instability, war, famine, colonization, you name it, suppression, you name it, it happened. And part of what happened to a lot of these ancient traditions is that they went underground and they became very sequestered to very small groups of people. And sometimes it was very elite, so only royalty, or only people with political access, or only people who were part of those lineages or those traditions. And then there was a rebirthing, if you will, an impetus for people from the East, for teachers from the East to travel and spread the message. Some of it through the goodness of well being and wanting to share, some of it profit driven, as I'm sure you can imagine, and all of it done with an expressed interest in this particular form of movement, breath work, meditation for the greater common good. Yogi Bhajan was the teacher who brought Kundalini Yoga here to the West from India. And the time that he came was a time of political unrest in the US and Canada. It was 1960s, flower power, hippies, Southern California, lots of drugs, lots of people shedding old systems and looking for something new. And he fell right into that. In fact, he actually spent some time here in Toronto, very close to where I opened my first studio. And he was a dude with some incredible enlightenment around techniques and access to information that had been previously very secret. And he was a dude who also probably hungry for fame, money, and all the trappings of what those things mean. So I won't spend too much time on Yogi Bhajan. He was somebody who was not a big factor in my education around Kundalini Yoga. He died many years ago and has left a legacy of documented practices and also a documented history of acting terribly. So I want to let you know that so that we're in the spirit of candidness, and to say also that what you're experiencing here on this channel is my version. So who am I? And what am I doing here? Many years ago, here's my story. Many years ago, I found myself in my early 30s feeling very dusted and busted, very emotional, very commotional, very unsure of myself in the world. I'm brown, I'm an androgynous person, queer, and I didn't have home inside of myself. I had been conditioned to believe that something about me was just not good enough. And I acted out all over the place. I mean, I had a job, I had a good job. I had friends, I had good friends, but there was something inside of me that was missing. And I also had a deep desire for artistry and connection and spirit. And I found my way slowly but surely into yoga classes. And the way that that happened was through people in my life who said, hey, come and check this out. And that happened for the first yoga class. Somebody I met very casually said to me, hey, come and check out this class with me. And I had the response that many of you might have had. Yoga, I'm not flexible. I don't like that stuff. It's too slow. It's too boring. And she's like, yeah, but try it out anyway. And because I thought she was pretty cool, I was like, okay, let's do it. And then I did it. And I liked it. And I didn't even know why I liked it. And I kept on going back and going back and going back. And pretty soon, one of my teachers said, you know, you need to take this more seriously. You're asking good questions. You're so regular in your practice. You seem to be fired up and driven by all of this. And I thought, okay, well, I might as well. I'm not doing anything else. I wasn't with a partner or not having kids at that time. And I thought, yeah, you know, let's do it. And I remember sitting down in my first Kundalini yoga class and tuning in for the first time. You will be acquainted with that mantra very soon if you haven't already checked out some of these videos. And was sitting in a class with 15 other people, and we tuned in and we looked around. I looked around for the first time and was like, "Whew, what was that?" It was a it was a reckoning. It was a soul inspiring moment. I think back now and I feel it still to this day that something inside of me shifted. And I went through that practice. I went through that training. It was 500 hours, 3 times a week, and 3 weekends a month for a full year. That was it. That's all I did. And along the way, I learned a lot, including all the weird habits I had and all the places I was slowing myself down and where I had inherited trauma from my parents and from my family and how I was showing up in the world, uneasy, not clear, hesitant. Um, and I saw that start to change. And make no mistake, I didn't start teacher training to become a teacher. I was quite mortified by that idea, in fact, because at the time, yoga was granola bars and incense and hokey pokey and flaky and all that stuff. Yoga did not have a good reputation 20, 30 years ago, not a like serious reputation. And there I was enjoying it, loving it, starting to teach and seeing that people were having a really good benefit from what was happening. And I guess you could say I was hooked. Like I could finally feel that I was of service to people in my life. I was actually having that space. There was no one like me teaching. And I liked that. And I wanted to be a safe space for people. And from there, you could say, like, I worked 9 to 5. And then in my off hours, 5 to 9, I would teach and teach and teach and teach and teach. And I just loved it. And it introduced me to so many interesting people and experiences. I went off to India for 6 months to do some training there. That was amazing. I did laughter yoga. That was amazing. And I continued to learn. And a lot of that learning was the science of meditation and the science of the body and polyvagal theory. And eventually I became a counselor and started to study numerology, which is also part of Kundalini Yoga. And in front of me started to blossom this career that I had never anticipated. Never anticipated. And if you told me 15 years ago, 20 years ago, this is what you'd be doing, I'd be not believe you at all. And then, okay, so we fast forward a little bit, and I was teaching, and then my next door neighbor said to me, I was living in downtown Toronto, said, "Hey, there's this thing called YouTube, and I think putting some yoga videos there would be a good idea." And I was like, "Okay, that sounds interesting." And we went out to a local park, and there you'll see in that video you'll see my cousin Nadia, who is now also a yoga therapist herself, this guy from Lululemon who helped us get sorted with all of our white outfits, and my cousin doing hair and makeup, and my buddy who lived next door put that video up on YouTube for me. I gave no thought of it. That was 15 years ago. I didn't really, YouTube is not what it was then, what it is now. So I put that there, and I didn't say forget about it, but kind of set it and forget it. And I went on then to open a yoga studio, to have a family, and to go through the pandemic. And the pandemic introduced all of us to a time where we had to sit alone. And that was the time where my YouTube videos started to really exponentially take off. We created more content. I was creating content all the way through, but that was really the resurgence. And I remember in a video saying, "Hey, if any of you want to get in touch with me, thanks for watching. Like, let me know what you're up for and where you're watching from." And the next morning, my inbox was full. And I thought, you know what? Maybe this is also my key to the next step of my own life, because having a yoga studio, if any of you have done that or worked retail at all, those hours are long. They're pretty grueling, and you deal with a lot of people and a lot of different headspaces, and it's not always the most nurturing to the people who are running that business. Certainly, I felt that, and I was ready to, let that go and find something else. And that, little signal from all of you here on YouTube was the defining line around, okay, if I close this business, then I probably could make something of going online, or at least I could try it. And this was in the early days of the pandemic, and I could see business-wise that we weren't going to be able to turn a profit anymore. So the reasons for closing that bricks and mortar studio became more and more evident. More and more people were booking with me online. I was taking my teachers who were in my teacher training program on Zoom anyway, and I thought, well, I did it once, let's try it again. Sure enough, that took off. Numerology took off. So many things started to unfold in that time. And I also learned a lot about trauma, a lot. I saw myself more clearly. I saw everybody in my life a little bit more clearly. I studied it. I started to realize how closely connected Kundalini Yoga is to regulating the nervous system, and then how it could be helpful for PTSD, for anxiety, for depression, for addictions, for anything that you have going on, that I've also had going on, that I could find a way. I'm not saying that to get off your meds and just, like this is the only answer. What I'm saying is that it's an answer that many of us didn't know about. And so part of my role here, I think, in this lifetime, looking at my own numerology, is to make sure that I have a voice that is heard around these things, and that you also then have some alternates, and that you have a place to come that feels safe, that is safe for you in terms of your identities. So whether you're a person of color, a queer person, somebody who needs accessibility modifications, my hope is that you find yourself feeling safe and connected. And of course, if none of those identities, those intersectionalities are you, that you also feel like, hey, that's my yoga teacher. That's my Kundalini. I love that stuff. It works for me. And that, to me, not only brings a feeling of great satisfaction. I'm getting a little emotional. I think what it does too is correct some generational stuff, where maybe just maybe, the parts of my bloodline that needed to be heard and seen and politically couldn't, economically couldn't, socially couldn't, including all the women in my family and anybody else who might have been hidden or silenced in any way, that somehow this is honoring them. There you go. So that's Kundalini Yoga. I have had many teachers in my life. Some of them I parted ways with. Some of them I hold near and dear. I mean, all of them, whether they were shining examples of how to show up as human beings or not so much. I honor all of them because that is also what life is that we learn from our worst teachers and we also learn from our worst teachers. Including our kids, including our parents, including our extended families, including all the things that are happening and all the things that you're learning and going through and inviting me into those conversations with you. I think that all of it has come to serve us in this way. And so that's my story, Morning Glory. And I'm really happy to share it with you. Thank you for listening. If you want to get in touch one-to-one or any of my group coaching sessions, links are in the bio. I'd love to hear from you. And just drop a comment. Let me know where you're coming in from. Let me know how you found this. Let me know if you cried along with me. Actually, don't do that. I'll see you in the next video. Lots of love.